And, you mentioned Bayern Munich here and their midfield. I mean, they have Alexander Pavlovic. That's probably the most positive story out of this Bayern Munich game, Stefan. Because I think that they were really lucky to win this game. Neuer saves a penalty that he caused. Then he concedes a penalty, right? And I think that Augsburg shot themselves a little bit in the foot here by conceding 3 times. This is a game that had a draw written all over it. And, somehow Bayern got really, really lucky that it didn't end up to be a draw. VAR helped them twice, once to take a goal away from Augsburg and once to give them a goal. I had issues with the Harry Kane goal because I don't think it was conclusive that the ball came from an Augsburg player. And what did we learn? What's the rule about VAR? It has to be clear and obvious. I didn't think that was clear and obvious. And if the pictures from TV don't give you a conclusive answer, the call on the field should be standing. It is what it is, we are going to have long debates about VAR, I think, for the rest of the season, but not at all a convincing Bayern performance everywhere across the field except for the one kid, Alexander Pavlovic, 19 years old. He's a holding number 6. That kid may save Bayern Munich 70 million euros in the transfer market, Stefan.
Yeah, that'd be quite something, wouldn't it? He's done well every time he's came on so far this season. I mean, it's only been a handful of performances, but he's been absolutely fine so far. You're absolutely right. He did tremendously well in this game in a match that Bayern really huffed and puffed in, to be perfectly honest with you. Even that first Augsburg goal, like the volley, which was obviously ruled offside, like it just felt like the thing that I found really interesting was that Augsburg just didn't really seem to have any fear of Bayern Munich whatsoever, which is quite a new thing, really, to be perfectly honest with you. But I don't know. Bayern have kind of been a really kind of tricky one recently in terms of the performances. They haven't been exactly great. I thought it was quite telling that, in one of the games this weekend, the linesman literally had to go off with a concussion and be replaced with a 3rd division goalkeeper. And that wasn't the most farcical thing about refereeing in the Bundesliga this weekend, because I completely agree with you. Some of the calls in this game were baffling, to be honest with you. And, I don't want to kind of start sounding like a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, because I really don't buy anything like that. The only thing I would say is that I definitely feel like at times it feels like Bayern games are under more scrutiny by VAR, and by that I mean you're right, there are calls that happen in Bayern games that maybe wouldn't get a second look in. For example, that Leverkusen game, which we're going to talk about, I thought there were some calls in the last kind of 15-20 minutes that the referee just brushed off and just kind of said play on. And I understand that technically and literally, VAR is at a discrepancy of the referee on the day. He chooses how much or how little of it he wants in these games. But
I have an issue with that too.
Exactly. And as you say, as you've said on this podcast a number of times, I think it's a great point. We're getting to this point now where referees don't actually want to do any refereeing. They just want to kind of outsource it all to the guys in the bunker in Cologne. And I mean, I don't think we actually. I think we did talk about it at the time when I went on that media trip for Leverkusen late last year. We did go to the bunker in Cologne. It's a really impressive place and really impressive kind of setup and technology, and everyone there knows what they're doing. They're all smart guys and they're all well-meaning and things like that. And we did ask them, like, are there referees that use VAR, the referees that don't? He's like, yeah, we have some referees who are constantly talking to us. And we have some who'll say, like, before kickoff, like, look, I'm not listening to anything you guys say. It's just, and it just comes down to their own personal style of refereeing. And, and that's, and I mean, I'm sure if Chris Williams was here, he would say that's how it should be, because at the end of the day, the rules of football are there to be interpreted by the referee on the day and how he interprets it. And I guess a referee should be able to decide how much or how little VAR they use in these games. But I do wonder if the referees are kind of in each Bayern Munich game. There's maybe the stakes are higher because they've got far larger support than any other club in the country. You can times that by 10 when you go to a global scale. every Bayern game's on television, and the fact that, referees in Germany do routinely come out and aren't forced to explain themselves, but are often obliged to go on, Doppelpass or whatever to explain what they did. So if that referee's got the big Bayern game that weekend, maybe they feel an obligation to be like, right, I need to use all the tools that are available to me, as opposed to whether if you're covering, Bochum versus Heidenheim, then maybe you don't have to rely on, maybe you don't have to have a second or third look at every single call. But that's just my 2 cents. I know Bayern fans will be probably kind of chewing wasps right now, or whatever the expression is, and rolling their eyes at what I'm saying here. But that game at the weekend struck me as quite peculiar, to be perfectly honest with you. And I say that knowing that Augsburg are the ones who got the penalty at the end of the day. So,
and I mean, like, it goes both ways. I would actually say it would go both ways, right? I mean, this can go in Bayern's favor, but it's also documented that it's gone against them for the same reasons. And I think you're quite right that their games are under more scrutiny, and it has worked in their favor and it has worked against them. And I think on balance, it's probably pretty even, but I can just go by. I don't use X or Twitter or Threads or any of those social medias doing match days anymore, because I find it quite tiring. I do use our Substack chat, which is absolutely exploded and is for subscribers only, right? And we had over 500 comments over this match day, which is a new record, by the way. And Bayern fans were actually quite critical of all the VAR decisions, including the ones that went against them. They did point out, and we have lots of Bayern fans in this chat, they did also say, wait, this isn't conclusive. What, the Harry Kane goal isn't conclusive, right? So in fairness, the ones that I interact with have voiced a lot of the same criticism that we have, right? And there just seems to be a tiredness of it because it isn't coherent. And as you said, referees have their own styles, which is a problem, and we're never going to get it to have it go away. I think too, and this is, maybe to pick up on the non-VAR things, what really struck me about this game too, it kind of, the way it was all inconsistent also really fitted Bayern Munich's game, because it was so inconsistent across the board. And yes, they have addressed their right back issue in Sasha Boy, who's arrived, right? And looks like a really good signing, and a little bit more of a long-term signing than the ones that have been previously been in the rumor mills. Kieran Trippier was obviously the one that they decided not to go for, and instead they signed a 23-year-old right back, right, with lots of upside, which I think is a smart move. But it made me think that this team remains a work in progress, and although their points total is actually quite impressive, I find it also interesting that teams like Augsburg now go at them and say, hey, we can get something here. And I feel like the entire mood in the league has changed when it comes to playing Bayern Munich. It's no longer a game that you just chalk off as a loss.
Yeah, and it's for the better for the league in that regard. And, Bayern Munich fans will obviously take issue with that because it'll be a black mark against Tuchel's record. I think you can maybe point some of that to the way that Bayern even play under Tuchel. They're not fast, they're not dynamic, they're not possession-based as they have been under maybe Tuchel, Pep Guardiola. They're not, what's the word I'm looking for? Ruthless as they were maybe under Hansi Flick. They just kind of linger a lot on the ball. They don't do a huge amount off and on it. There's a lot of players in that team who just are not playing particularly well. It's quite interesting to see Alphonso Davies step up with a right-footed goal from outside the box, because he's obviously a player who we've been talking about a lot recently. But yeah, you can go through that whole team. Obviously, Kingsley Coman as well, picking up a big injury, which we haven't even talked about. So yeah, there's a lot of issues in that team, and we'll obviously touch a bit more on the transfer roundup show this week, but or maybe we won't actually if we do focus on something else. But we'll cover it at some point. But it is interesting that they've managed to find a gap, fill a gap rather, with Sasha Boy coming in the right back, and what that can do for midfield if Konrad Laimer comes into the central midfield position, because I do still kind of feel like, obviously Pavlovic played that role at the weekend, but it feels to me like Tuchel's still kind of scrambling and trying to find how to get that to click, because it doesn't feel like Bayern will actually click into gear until they fix that midfield.
I got a really cryptic text when I kept asking around about Alphonso Davies and his new Bayern contract.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of it.
Smoke and mirrors. Just smoke and mirrors.
I guess we'll see. I think it sounds like there's something coming around soon, one way or another. But for Bayern's fortune, Stefan, Leverkusen did drop points.